I'm Brent Leary.
Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM Players. It's a rather nice Thursday afternoon here in Atlanta. I think we're pushing 70 degrees or so.
Yeah, we're actually a little over that. I think we're like 72 or 73 in Virginia here.
That makes me feel bad. We're supposed to be warmer than you guys.
And I'm happy if you are. I, I, give me 68 to 70. That's my numbers. That's
What about 75?
Too high
All
for all reasons.
right. We better do this now because it looks like our buddy who we've been missing the last couple of weeks is back. Sven is back with the moment.
Yeah, finally.
And what do we have here? Is he giving it away?
No.
Is it Fijian? No.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, he is giving it away.
Is it Fijian?
Well, it's a Pacific Islander dialect or language.
No diggity.
Yeah, he gave it away.
Wasn't that a song?
Yeah, hot diggity, dog diggity.
No, there was a song, a rap song back in the day called No Diggity.
Oh, I have no idea. I just remember.
So we could call this Knee Diggity.
I'm old enough to remember Perry Como. So, right.
Wow,
he used to sing Hot Diggity, Dog Diggity, which was the dumbest song. Even when I was a kid, I thought it was a dumb song.
I never thought Perry Como would get a shout out on this show, but you know.
What can I say? Moon River, man.
All right, so wait a minute. But you can't delete it from our StreamYard.
It's our stream.
So were we right? Was it Fijian?
Fijian. I knew it was a Pacific Island dialect because my immediate thought was like Hawaiian at first, but then I recognized some of it wasn't Hawaiian. Then I was thinking.
All right, now Sven is trying to make up for this. Is that Hawaiian or something?
No.
I can't do
that. That's some sort of African language, I would guess.
Oh, really? All right. Yeah. So we got you remember like they do a daytime and nighttime doubleheader? This is like a Sven moment of Sven double
header.
Like,
double header.
All right.
Double lingo.
All right, Sven, let us know what that one is.
Ghanan. I'm just guessing an African language or Maorian. No, not Maori. What's the name of that tribe?
Called Quest?
No. Yeah, right.
Anyway.
There's this big tribe in like Tanzania and so across multiple countries.
All right. Well, while we're waiting on that, we are the CRM Players. And guess what? We've been bringing the as since 2009. That's what I always want to make sure I emphasize the Z's because it can get a little tricky if you don't.
It could be Ghana. It could be Maori.
He says it's Ghana.
Oh, yay!
Once you choose hope, anything's possible. I like that.
I'd love to take credit for guessing, but the reality is that my guess was literally like a completely wild guess. It's not like I had any knowledge that it was Ghanan.
It's a wild guess. Huh?
It worked out. I do better. Look, I do better with Sven than I do with Stump the Godfather. I like what we're doing with Sven.
I like that Sven is back.
God, thank God he's back.
Yes, so we are glad for that, and we're also glad to be doing another show. And this is going to be a good one because earlier this week we did a first for us, at least, because there was two really important keynotes going on at the very same time. One was the Adobe Summit keynote, opening keynote, and one was the NVIDIA GTC opening keynote. And literally, one started an hour before the other, but they were both like 2 hours long. So there is an overlap period, and then we were like, well, how do we do that? And we just said we can do it. We got StreamYard. Yes, we do. We got anyway.
We're so lucky.
So we literally did a dual watch party with the first part of it really being dedicated to Adobe and kind of the mix of the next hour or so. And then we did finish up a little bit with NVIDIA going back and forth. But I thought it was really interesting. I thought both of them were interesting. And luckily for us, our guest at the bottom of the hour, well, let's put it like this. He was involved in one of them.
Yeah, let's not say which.
We'll
And
leave it
you're
for a
here
surprise.
if you're here, chances are pretty good you saw the preview, so you probably know.
Yeah, it's not really that big of a secret when you think of it like
No,
that.
not at all, in fact.
But we'll keep it for us for the time being. But anyway, so we did do that. We did check out some of those keynotes. Let's talk a little bit about the NVIDIA one, since we're going to be talking a lot about the other one probably.
Oh, you gave it away.
Well, I didn't say who it was. I just thought. But anyway, upon reflection, because that was what 2 days ago? Yeah, 2 days ago. Feels like it was a week ago.
It feels like it was a month ago, to be honest.
NVIDIA. So what did what did you think after getting a couple of days to let it mull over? Hey,
Sahil, how you doing, man? What time is it in India now?
Aren't they
what
like
time is it here?
10 and a half hours or 9.5 hours behind us? Oh, check it out. Look who it is. Mr. Michael Thomas.
Michael,
wanted to explore Adobe.
Yeah, the guest on our show. He's a good intro.
That's an interesting. Okay, yes. Stay tuned there, Mr. Thomas.
By the way, guest on our show. I think both of us would vouch for that guy who ran customer success initially. He was the first customer success person at Microsoft ever.
He was?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So we would both vouch for him completely as a reference.
He really should have been induced into the CRM Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree with you.
He's gonna pick up on something I said as part of that little thing there. Oh, it's 12:30 a.m.
Yeah, 12:30 in the morning.
So they're about 9.5 hours ahead of us. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Thanks for staying up. Yeah, we always appreciate it.
So NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Look, you made a really good point about NVIDIA, which is Jensen is already looking ahead to the next thing beyond agentic AI. That's a really important point, I think. The more I thought about it, the more I thought that's actually, again, the language he used for that, I think he needs to change. Yeah. But the idea is there. I do think the other thing I noticed, which I thought from a product standpoint and also from a just kind of general hardware advance, really, was that they have been spending over the last year an enormous amount of time reducing the footprint of their products. And, he did that by showing all those servers. And I mean, the power in those, I think they were
even the graphics card he was walking around.
Right. I mean, if you remember last year, he was trying to give away 72-pound chips. Right now, I mean, these things are probably 7 or 8 pounds. It's like my first TV that I ever bought, 65-inch, was 325 pounds.
Wow.
Right. That was last year's equivalent at the NVIDIA conference. But I think the fact that they're trying to streamline all this, and simplify and reduce the footprint, it was really a big deal, because the big question, which was not raised whatsoever, at least in the parts we saw, was the energy requirements for all of this. Right.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Leslie Hill. I'm guessing that's a compliment. We'll take it.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
Hill is definitely not the drunk type. Tired and busy, yeah, not the drunk type. But I think that look, the big conversation upcoming isn't really going to be, in terms of NVIDIA and companies like that, are not going to be agentic AI, physical AI, or any of those things. It's going to be where are we going to get the energy to run all this, right? And to me, that's a monstrously large question that gets talked about, but not relative to the excitement around things with agentic AI and the like. It doesn't get talked about at the scale it needs to be talked about, because it's literally so big that we're talking about a drain of energy like a full drain of energy resources, not of everything in the world, but you get my point. So
Yeah.
I didn't hear that discussion. I kind of wish I did, but I understand why they go into the smaller footprints and the like. Is partly to at least ameliorate that a bit. When it comes to chip technology, I don't have a clue what the guy's talking about, so I'm not gonna not gonna bother to even say that. What did you think?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the immediate thing to me was because every conference we've been to or sat in on the last 6 to 8 months probably, it's been nonstop agentic all the time, and everybody's uh, kind of demonstrating what they do, how they do it, and kind of the platform and how it fits in their platform, and what the hope is for it, which makes a lot of sense. And then you have what Jensen did at GTC. Remember that chart he kind of had where
Yeah.
like the slope of the AIs, and most people would have probably just had it stop at agentic, and then they would have talked specifically about that for a while. Theirs went past that to what you mentioned, it physical, which you could quibble about the names, but the fact of the matter is, while everybody else is so heavily focused on the agentic now, um, they're already looking past that. They're looking at what they're calling physical. Probably need to do a better job of just explaining exactly what that is, because I don't think what they call it is what they really see it as being, uh because a lot of people see it right now as, well, we already got physical AI. I don't think what is currently physical AI is what they're talking about or pointing to, but the fact that they're not even, the focus was not agentic, it was on what they're calling physical AI, really stood out to me, because that means that they're looking ahead, and they, quite honestly, they need to look ahead, because all the things that they're building out is going to allow the other folks or other companies to deliver some of the agentic stuff that they're talking about. And I think the other thing is, um, NVIDIA does have to get out there and, I think, sell a little bit more than they had to before, because you are seeing stuff like DeepSeek and this Manus, where they're showing or they're demonstrating. I don't know how real a lot of this is, but they are demonstrating certain capabilities that are running on less power and not on NVIDIA chips, which, some people are balking at the price tag of some of this stuff. And so I think he has to talk about, get ahead of the current agentic stuff, and think about, well, what are we going to be able to deliver ahead of that, which people are going to want to buy. So I think uh those are the two biggies for me. And then he mentioned, it looks like they're going to be focusing a lot more on inference,
Yeah.
and I think he said, 1,000 times more power to do certain things in that realm than what they're currently doing with where everybody's focused right now. So it was a different kind of keynote, because we're so used in our neck of the woods everything being about agentic, and he just spent like a little blip on a slide on agentic, and he was off to these other big things. So
Yeah, he had agentic as part of history.
Sahil says, I'm running DeepSeek on my PC. Yeah, let me put that out there. Let's see. I've always wanted to be in. Yeah. There's a little private joke in there for us. So I think one of the interesting competitions that probably nobody saw coming, especially when NVIDIA announced, or Jensen announced that device, that, what is it, like a $3,000 device? I can't remember
Yeah.
what it's called. I don't recall I didn't hear him talk about it, at least in the opening keynote. He might have talked about it in some other stuff, but a device that allows people to run LLMs, on the edge on their own. I think they were, yeah, I think they were literally a market that I think they might have thought they were going to own, or at least dominate, because of who they are and what, they were bringing out this new device. And then that Mac Studio came out, the upgraded with the M4 Max and the M3 Ultra chips, and having up to 512 gigabytes of memory and a 12 terabyte, no, 16 terabyte hard drive with a with 80 cores of GPU. So my Apple created a machine that people could actually buy and run robust LLM, analyze and crunch data and run LLMs and do a ton of things right on their own box, like and you look Sahil is talking about here. And I think that might give Nvidia a little bit more run for their money than they might have been expecting at least at maybe, I don't know if it's called the consumer grade or the prosumer grade LLM, kind of market. I think that's going to be an interesting one to see if Apple forces them to adjust or make some kind of transition, because I didn't see that coming. I didn't, that new Mac Studio. I'm thinking about getting it myself. I never thought 512 gigabytes of RAM and your own little footprint. You can do a lot of stuff with that. And I think people are not buying the Mac Studio for the tradition, not just the traditional reasons of, I can do all this graphics and stuff. I think they're buying it now to say, hey, we can actually run our own LLMs. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
So what's the base model look like for that? The app, just a pure base model.
Well, the Mac Studio, there's the M4 Max version, which is ironically the 1999 base model, and then you can stack on top of that. But then the M3 Ultra version of the Mac Studio is the one that I think it starts at like $4,000, and you can add up to 512 gigabytes of RAM on it and a 16 terabyte hard drive, and it has 80 GPU cores. You can buy the version that, like, I think the fully spec'd up with the 512 megabytes of RAM and 16 terabytes and all that stuff is like $14,000. So you could start out at 2,000 and you can work your way all the way up to 14,000.
Well, I would say this much, knowing that 14,000 for all of that's actually not very expensive. That said, the people who would buy a $3,000 NVIDIA machine aren't buying the $14,000 version of the Mac Studio. So effectively, the question is going to be interesting and become, at the competitive price point, what is the Mac Studio going to offer versus NVIDIA's machine? But then again, here's the other difference. The Mac Studio already exists.
Oh yeah, people got it.
Machine is a guess that it might somewhere.
And there's so many things. I've been watching a lot of these reviews on YouTube where the M4 Max outperforms on certain things even the M3 Ultra, and then the M3 Ultra is when you start talking the LLMs part, because of all the memory you can get on it, because it has the 80 cores of GPU in addition to the 32 cores of CPU, and I think most of them are performance cores. That's where you see people that are serious about doing all this LLM stuff. That's where they're going towards.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like ultimately, look, it really depends on what you're interested in doing. Like, for example, I've seen, because being such a crazy gamer, I was looking when the M4 chips came out. I knew as far as gaming laptop goes, I'm never buying a Mac because that's ridiculous. But for everything else, why not? I mean, wait, maybe, but you get the point. But I looked into all of it, and I did a number of things where I was just watching general videos on performance differences. And there were times where the M4 Mac just slaughtered the Windows 11 equivalents, and there were times where the Windows 11 equivalents just wrecked even M4 MacBook Pros or Ultra, MacBook Pro Maxes or Ultras even. It just depends. It depends on the test you're running. It depends on what you're looking to do with it, etc. I mean, obviously, if there's not an NLU, it's going to be, I don't know how the MacBook Studio handles, NLUs or anything like that.
Oh, there are people that are already testing that kind of stuff up, and there's a site, I think it's called the LLM hardware calculator,
Yeah, that's it.
where you could go and check out how many parameters, how much memory you're going to need in order to run it, billions of parameters. And these Mac Studios, that's when you have a 512 meg of RAM.
But again, those are the $14,000.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there are some people who buy that who thought they would never be able to host their own LLM stuff and
oh
do
yeah,
all that.
no, if you're in that world, $14,000 is a blip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in that world, but
Oh.
but but it does force you to really look at depending. You really need to know what you're going to be doing for graphics work, like video editing.
Yeah.
There are some benefits to the Mac Ultra because it has like double the amount of video encoders in it
Yep.
over the M4 Max, and it also seems to have a wider memory bandwidth pass through. So those are things that are really important. But in order to really see a big difference, you'd have to be doing like 8K video streams.
That's the other side of it. A lot of these machines are built ahead of the market itself, right? Way ahead of it.
Yeah.
8K is becoming something, meaning it exists now. And you even can get a TV in 8K. You can get videos that are being shot in 8K from cameras that can handle 8K. Things like that are happening now. Where, a year and a half, 2 years ago, that was not the case. 6K was kind of edge of the universe with the Blackmagic cameras and the like. But
so look at Sahil. He says, "I am considering a Mac again."
Yeah. Well, for the
M3
work
Ultra at the very it all depends. Like I'm gonna get a Mac Studio. I don't know if I'm gonna get the M3 or because the M4 Max is getting rave reviews too, and it's a fraction of the price. So it's.
M4,
but if you're planning on doing serious, or if you want to experiment with serious LLM work and processing and all that kind of stuff.
Well, let's say this: you could open a small company with those, right? I mean, as opposed to, have to hope you could potentially, again, jury's still out; it's too new, but potentially compete with companies who have much bigger firepower to do their LLM work.
They're even talking about how you can. They didn't use this word again, but like daisy chain two Mac Studios together to create a super LLM processing thing. I mean,
those are usually what's the old saying? They're easier said than done.
Yeah, but to me, it's just fascinating how nobody was even talking about this stuff last year. And
when it came to the Mac Studio, no one was talking about it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's so brand new, but I look. I mean, the thing is, I don't doubt that you're going to see companies that work with compute power, all build machines like that. They're all going to go for, and at the level of, what Jensen mentioned with the $3,000 one, at the level of the $14,000, you'll see more and more and more of that. I will bet you, and I at some point, companies like Asus and all these other ones, which are right now just big, heavy load GPU companies, really, in terms of what the machines that they produce, will build machines that actually will try to handle that level of computing power, because it's going to be a big market. It's going to be a big market on the hardware side when you can bring it to the level of a consumer.
It'll be really fascinating to see what the uptake is for these high level Macs, like to see how they are actually being bought. And I find it really interesting. If you look at YouTube, and like I said, I look at a lot of these videos. I look at a lot because I am considering trying to. I held off on getting a Mac Mini because I thought there was a possibility of a new Mac Studio coming out, and I'm kind of glad I did. But I don't know how much I want to spend for video editing. I don't have to spend $14,000.
Right.
I don't have to come close to spending 14 grand.
Well, maybe you can use an LLM and build something that'll edit your videos for you.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe there's we have a guest that works at a company that kind of helps with that kind of. I don't know. We'll see. By the way, though, before we're getting close to our guest time. Let's see what time. Yeah, we are.
I'm dreading this moment, though.
And you know what? There's no point in dreading it because even as much as you dread it, it still comes. And what do you say that is? It would be this.
And now it's time for Stump the Godfather with the Venerable Paul Greenberg. Brought to you by Microsoft Dynamics 365 Copilot.
I always like to let Benny ride out that.
I can picture it too.
Yeah.
Picture it from the opening of the show.
All right, it's that time, folks. Stump the Godfather, and I make sure I say stump because I've been accused of saying stomp too many times. So stump the Godfather. This is probably going to be a quick one.
Good.
And this
unless I don't like the source, of course.
Well, have you ever heard of the World Happiness Report?
Yeah, I actually. Oh, you don't want to do this one.
Oh, you read it?
I downloaded the whole thing and read half of it.
Oh, well, maybe you read the wrong half.
No, I won't answer.
You might get the wrong half. All right, so right off the press, the World Happiness Report 2025 edition.
Really, I had a feeling you were going to do that.
I just saw something that kind of caught my interest, and I thought it would make a good question. So, in 2023, roughly blankety blank 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 percent of Americans reported eating all of their meals alone the previous day. Not just one meal, all of the previous day meals.
I won't answer this. I'm not going to answer this. I know the answer. I saw it.
Oh, you do?
That was literally the first thing I read because it was in the beginning. Then they had, and the rest of the question was how much better it was with the people who eat socially, and they had another number.
All right, so
let everyone else answer.
Yeah, everybody else get and that includes our guests in the green room. You can throw a guess out in the private chat, and we'll put it up there. What percentage of Americans reported eating all of their meals alone the previous day?
The one hint I'll tell everybody is I was actually a little shocked. It was.
All right, that's enough of the hints.
I won't say anymore.
No more hints.
No more.
I want to see some. All right, Sahil, Michael Thomas, Finn, our guest. Oh, let's see. I think we have. Okay, wow. Whoa, our guest in the green room says he thinks 45% of Americans reported eating all of their meals alone the previous day. That's a pretty big number. Anybody else put a guess in? What percentage of Americans reported eating all of their meals alone the previous day? That's a lot of lonely people. Huh?
You're not kidding.
All right. Anybody throw a guess out there if you would. And let's see what is Finn talking about here. An observation that the number of transistors on a microchip roughly doubles every 2 years, whereas it cost is halved over that same time frame. Huh. Interesting. Okay, look at this. Sven is coming up with the same answer, 45%. Sahil is saying 19%. And you say you absolutely know what it is.
I saw it. But I'm not gonna. You do your thing. I want to find it.
Well, I'm gonna reveal the answer.
I'm going to find. There's this other stat. I want to find now. I'm looking for it right now.
Actually. All right. Well, do you want to just say what it is?
No. I'm going to find this.
Because I'm getting ready to reveal it anyway.
You go ahead. Reveal it.
No, I want you on the record. I think you're pulling the wool over my head.
Let's just say that the people who had the number there,
yes,
they were off, but they weren't as far off as you would think.
Okay, what the hell? Just give me a number.
I'm finding this number. It's killing me. I gotta find it.
You know what's killing me? You are not answering the question. Just say it.
I'm not gonna.
Oh my God.
This
You
is-
can't do a Stump the Godfather without the Godfather answering the question,
You
even if he
can't.
knows the answer.
This is
Go
total-
ahead.
This
Please.
This is revenge.
I beg of thee. Just throw the number out.
Nope.
You know, my birthday is coming up. This would be
yes,
a
I
great
do.
gift. The gift of answering my question.
Nope. I did way better than that.
Wait a minute. Brent is too young. He doesn't know Moore's law. Oh, all right, Sven. Yeah, okay.
Hold
All
on.
right. So you're just going to leave me hanging?
Yes, I am.
Oh, this is like a first and a worst.
I know.
This is a worst first.
I'm so happy.
All right. Since we got a guest, you know, we can't hang. Just throw a name. Just throw it out there, please,
Just
please,
go.
please.
Just go.
Oh.
I'm looking for this. I gotta find it.
This is you just completely.
I
I don't even know what you're
downloaded
looking
this
for.
this morning.
I'm glad our guest is having a good time laughing at us. He
Yeah.
probably is wondering what he got himself into at this point.
Don't worry, you're better. You'll be better off than this.
I can't do a Stump the Godfather if you don't agree
can.
to it.
Okay,
I can't do it.
Okay, I'll say just so this will make you feel better, even though it's not
Yes.
true. I don't know.
That's just give me a number,
No,
please.
no, I gotta find this.
I can't go on with the show. I cannot go on with the show.
Well, you're such
please.
a diva.
I am a diva.
Such a diva. Hold on, I'm still looking.
I just needed one.
No, I gotta find this. It's driving me crazy because
I don't know what you're
this is really the
finding.
core. I'm finding literally the core of the World Happiness Report data. I'm just finding for where I downloaded it onto here, and I'm literally like trying to find out where it is.
This is painful.
I'll tell you. Look, I'll tell you what I will do is I'll be truthful. Here's the deal. You reveal it, and if I think, oh, wait a minute, that's not the number I knew.
What is this? What are you just taking a stand? What is it, a rebel without a cause?
No, it's actually me trying to find some data. I can't.
All right, we gotta go. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not gonna put it on.
Sweet stuff, man.
Even our guest is like, I'm with Sahil. That's cheating.
No,
they're calling you cheaters.
No, I'm not for that number. I'm looking for the number. The number.
They don't believe you.
Where America ranks on the World Happiness scale.
They do not believe you. They think you're cheating.
Number one in the world is Finland. I can tell you that.
That would be a great answer to if I asked for that, but I'm not asking for that.
I'm just telling you. I'm looking for where America is.
Okay, we gotta go. We gotta go.
You give it.
This is a first, folks. Unfortunately, I will not be able to reveal the answer because the Godfather didn't answer the question. You cannot do a Stump the Godfather without the Godfather answering the question. So
this is Stump the
Godfather. Please, my apologies for this. This will be the rarest of Stump the Godfathers where other people answer, but the Godfather doesn't. All right.
I literally saw the answer. I'm not going to do it.
Oh my God. All right. Sorry. I'm leaving everybody hanging because I'm not giving in on this. So I'm turning the show over to the Venerable Paul Greenberg so he can announce today's guest without me showing what the actual answer to the question is.
Maybe halfway through I'll answer it, but right now
halfway through, no, we're not doing that.
Good.
Here's Paul Greenberg. He is going to do the introduction to today's guest.
All right. So I feel like redeemed. Finally,
not a redeeming quality.
It is for me. And I'm the only one who has to care about that.
This is the first time this guy has been on with this. This will probably be the last time after watching this.
I'm sure he loves it. I would. Okay, so our guest today. So as you know, we did the Adobe Summit, digital experience summit, watch party a couple of days ago, and Adobe actually they did a lot of really interesting things at that summit. Now, at the core of this, of course, are always what Adobe does with its products, what Adobe does with its, not even just the products themselves, but how Adobe builds out a platform and then how they design an ecosystem or how they expand and extend their ecosystem around that platform. This guest is one of the people who's directly responsible for everything I just said, right? Literally. Both the product development and his title is product management, but more equally as much is how to extend the ecosystem around that. And that is the power of Adobe too, is that they have that ecosystem. Now, I don't know this gentleman. We met actually, he probably doesn't remember this. I oddly do, because he was at Microsoft at the time, and we were doing an analyst summit or analyst thing, and he was there. He wasn't presenting. He was there, and I was introduced by what was it? Michael Eisenberg. He'll know him, the fellow. Great guy. He introduced me to Daniel, and we shook hands. We talked for about a minute. But the thing I remember is he had he was very happy. I guess that was kind of where I'm not joking. I literally remember he had a big smile, very happy kind of guy. And so when I saw he was going to be the guest, and sure enough, the picture of him has that big smile he had, it clicked back into place. So I'd like to introduce the guy who is going to tell us about the products and the ecosystem, and do it with that giant smile of his, Daniel Sheinberg.
Wow. Thanks, Paul.
And I do remember that meeting. I remember it explicitly.
Right. I'm impressed by that, and I, after that intro, I'll forgive you for like being the guy who brings his phone to bar trivia night.
I don't go to bar trivia night. I wasn't looking. No, I literally downloaded that report that morning.
Yeah, but nobody can believe you because you didn't.
I don't care why do I care whether they believe me or not?
Don't you care about the people who watch?
The only one who has to believe me is me, right? Yeah. And ultimately, I know what I did. I didn't look for that number. I saw it. It's one of the first numbers they talk about in the summary.
I'd like to thank Daniel for being here and for also answering the question.
And by the way, the answer to the U.S. position in that 24th. That's how badly we do on the World Happy.
Yeah, but what's the percentage?
I have no clue. The 24th.
All right, let's move on. We're not going back. All right, so I had an opportunity to meet Daniel last year because our mutual buddy Doug Anderson. I had just done a few good minutes with him, and I was like, and I think Daniel came up and he was saying some really cool stuff, and I was like, he's probably somebody I probably should talk to too. And I was like, oh yeah. So we hooked us up. We did a quick one. So it's good to see you again. I wanted to kind of start with, I think the most memorable line that I heard from the keynote, and it came from Shantanu, and I actually did a little visual for it. I don't know why this stood in my head as long as it has, but creativity is the new productivity. And when I started thinking about it, and then in the context of what you guys are doing with the content supply chain and the whole move to customer experience orchestration, it just all seems to kind of fit. And I know last year I asked you a little bit about the content supply chain, and this was literally a year ago at Summit. And I think one of the things you said at that time is Shantanu was still the acting CMO, I think, at that time last year. And he was, I think, kind of exploring a lot of these things because it was impacting him, his role as CMO. But now you have a CMO, and it's been a year since that conversation. And it feels like the content supply chain has got nothing but even more important and critical. And maybe you could start with how things, like a general kind of thesis or lay of the land of how things have changed with the Gen Studio, content supply chain management, and maybe how the whole rise of agentic has impacted some of those things.
Yeah, that's a great jumping off point because, as you said, like there's a lot that goes on at Summit, a lot to take away. And I think this is a really good starting point because, the content supply chain is really all about the explosion in interactions between consumers and brands and the need for relevant personalized content at every one of those touch points, right? And nobody can keep up on a human scale. It's not possible. And so I think part of what you were seeing, last year and then even more so this year is how Adobe can really address that need in a unique way. And one of the big themes of the conference was creativity plus marketing, because if you noticed, and this is kind of maybe a little inside baseball, but like that content supply chain section of the keynote on Tuesday, the host for content supply chain was David Wadhwani. Yeah. And David heads up our digital media business, right? So he owns the Creative Cloud. And when you think about the content supply chain, it's that combination of everything we do for creatives, as well as the Experience Cloud, which David doesn't own, but all the Experience Cloud solutions that come together, to take you through that flow of the content supply chain, right? It starts out with workflow and planning. It goes into creation and production. There's asset management. Then there's delivery and activation, and then there's analytics and measurement, right? Like that whole life cycle of content, it really takes everything Adobe's doing, or maybe not quite everything, but many of the things Adobe's doing across the business, many of the different solutions that we have to really deliver that at scale. And so it's really exciting to have David up there kind of representing the whole story, and see people coming in from different parts, different teams, different product organizations to represent the work they're doing to kind of bring it all together. Certainly, everybody knows about Adobe and creative production, right? These are the tools creatives are using every day. What people are learning about in that content supply chain context is, well, there's this whole strategy and planning that goes into it, and ideation. You may have seen there was the kind of vision demo of a new ideation product that would be that'll be Gen AI powered, to be able to kind of get teams collaborating and thinking about the content that they're going to need for a campaign, but also what are the audiences they're going to need, and what are all the channels they're going to reach, and how are they going to be successful with this campaign. So that's kind of the creativity and marketing coming together. But you've got solutions like Workfront and Frame.io that are really key to those workflow pieces around the content supply chain. Then you've got the creative tools and lots of really cool stuff happening there with Firefly. They just keep releasing new, really exciting things with Firefly, and you're starting to see how things like the text to video obviously continues to have additional models releasing. You may have seen the translate and lip sync, which is really cool functionality. But it's not just about one creative person kind of doing that in isolation. It's also leaning into what we call Firefly services, which allows you to hook into those APIs, the creative APIs, and do this at scale, right? So you've got teams that can now crank out hundreds, thousands of versions of this, recognizing that you've got a video to start with, but now you need it in 50 different languages, and you need it in five different formats. It's got to show up well on a mobile device. It's got to show up well in an Instagram video. It's got to show up well on a desktop, right? So being able to do that through technology rather than people having to do all that mundane work is just critically important.
Well, one of the things that I think we all noticed, for a long time, you had a Creative Cloud, and you had Digital Experience Cloud, and the twain weren't meeting, let's just say. It was very noticeable this time that not only were they meeting, but they were genuinely integrated in the way they need to be for Adobe as a company to move forward, but also that's the way the world is actually what the world needs for its organization. And the content supply chain, in fact, when it first came out, was a couple of years now.
Yep.
I remember Brent and I both noticed that, because one of the things we've always identified was content distribution was the big issue, not the creation part, not the consumption part, but the distribution part was a huge issue for everybody, right? For all companies. And then when content supply chain came out, it was the first time I think that we ever saw the actual solution was there. And you now, by the interlock between the two pieces of Adobe, let's say, it's amazing. So given all of that, given that that's, Adobe's moving forward in a kind of a unified fashion with it, and you're at the center, obviously, of a lot of the product side, but you're also, as I mentioned, part of your work is extending the ecosystem itself. Let's go to that a little bit. So when you're looking ahead at those things, unified Adobe distribution, got all these pieces together, where do you extend the ecosystem to? What becomes Adobe's objective in terms of where they go next when it comes to partners, when it comes to, it could be acquisitions, but other companies that you would work with?
Yeah. And there were some really exciting announcements around that this year that kind of give you at least some idea of kind of where we're going in these areas. One of the things we've had that's been really exciting is the partnership we've had with a lot of big agencies. Many of them are working with us. So our solution to the content supply chain is our Gen Studio solution broadly, right? And we see a lot of the big agencies have signed on as partners with us and are leveraging this to drive their own businesses as well as driving their content supply chain on behalf of their customers. So that's been a really great partnership there because, it's an understanding of like this content supply chain doesn't just live within one of our customers' business. It also lives within their agency partner, right? They're doing a lot of this creative work. And so it needs to kind of cross those boundaries rather than it being, a solution that just lives within one organization. So that's one of the ways that the ecosystem's really been expanding. Another way is when we think about, activating content out into channels. And so there've been a lot, especially with the Gen Studio for performance marketing. One of the areas there is we're making it really easy for people to activate that content into advertising channels, right? Into Google, into Meta, into LinkedIn and Microsoft's ecosystem. So that's another kind of point of contact where these things start to come together. And then the other thing that we really see a lot of is just a focus on, how can we incorporate the tools? And that's the API strategy right there. We think about like the Firefly APIs. Once we open up that Firefly services, or we create the ability for someone to do Firefly creative production, which is kind of like a UI on top of those APIs. Like now that kind of opens it up to people who are interacting in their own environments. And then I think the last piece I would say is we're starting to see it in some of the, and I'm sure we'll get into agents in a minute, but some of these sort of agentic environments, some of the frameworks that people are using, we're starting to expose, for example, Adobe Express into the Microsoft Copilot environment. So you can kind of see these things building on each other. There's just so many places across the ecosystem where it can plug into, and I think we're really at the beginning of it right now.
I want to pop up this. We did a watch party during the opening keynote, and I want to pop up one of the comments that came up from our friend Marta Federici. Is it a hard R? Or is it a Federici?
Federici, you got
Federici. Okay. So she's heads up CX for Henkel, right? Is it Henkel? Okay.
Yeah, global CX for Henkel.
Yeah, global CX. And so she was watching along with us, and actually, this is just one of the comments. She had kind of nice number of comments, but she was like brand plus compliance, and I think this is during the Gen Studio demo, where there's a lot of creation of all the being able to shape and form an image into all sorts of different formats and looks and things, but it also had the component of making sure it was brand compliant and also any kind of regulation compliance there. So how is this changing the relationship that different folks along the content supply chain have with each other as they start to use these services, and like more creative folks are able to create without having to worry about those things, but also how like the whole idea of collaboration around the content supply chain comes together when you have something like Gen Studio and some of the things that you demoed the other day.
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that, and maybe I'll just set a little context for people who maybe weren't on the keynote. So this idea of brand compliance and regulatory compliance, one of the things that we've been able to do with the advent of Gen AI technologies is build out these services that can actually can understand your brand guidelines or your regulatory guidelines, and then can ingest or examine a piece of content and determine whether it complies with those guidelines, right? And this is something that LLMs, with the right training, actually can be pretty good at. And so we've incorporated that into the Gen Studio solution and the Gen Studio Performance Marketing product. As what we've done there, what we've implemented ourselves is this brand check, and then we've also been working with partners on the more regulatory check. And so it can come back, it can evaluate something and give you a brand score. And you can set a threshold for, what's a passing grade. And then that allows, not necessarily allows approval. I mean, you could do approval in an automated way, but gives you the feedback that you need to decide whether to do approval. And so it's pretty transformative, because one of the things that creative teams spend a lot of time on, and it was great. We had folks from Coca-Cola here presenting. One of their creative directors, Rafa Abreu, was on stage in one of the keynotes that I worked on. And he was up there talking about like the brand, that creative team spends a lot of time coming up with, what is the look and feel of Coca-Cola's brand? And, there's like long, PDF documents of how do you describe the brand guidelines and so on. And the intent of this is to disseminate it across the organization and make sure people stay on brand. But in a large organization where you've got people out, in some small market who aren't talking to headquarters and don't have access to the creative team, people are going to go do their own thing, and maybe it's going to be on brand, maybe it's not going to be on brand. So historically, what that's meant is you've had to kind of centralize everything. But now with the ability to sort of do this compliance at scale, it frees up the creative team so they're not, sort of playing cop all the time. They're not overloaded with requests for, is this okay, is this not okay? But also it allows them to have sort of the confidence, like not to be awake at night wondering like what the heck's going on out there. And so that gets built into things like Gen Studio Performance Marketing, like Adobe Express, where you can establish these brand guidelines, put them out to put them out to internal folks who are developing content, and be confident that what they're doing is on brand, and they can, those people can get that feedback before they release it. Like, because, a lot of times what we see is the marketer who's out there says, well, I'm not a creative, like I'm a little scared to go and put this out there and then find out I really screwed up, So this also gives them that confidence that, no, I'm in alignment with what the expectations are in headquarters. And so it's pretty important to that democratization of content creation. And obviously also it works for the automated content creation, right? Everything when agents are creating or generative AI models are creating content, it allows you to run these checks in an automated way. And even then, as the next step, the check can provide the feedback. Why is it off brand? And then you can regenerate based on that feedback and get it back into alignment, right? So it helps that feedback cycle in the creation as well.
Well, actually, your mention of customers made me think of something. So let's say, so on the Creative Cloud side, you've always had the Behance, the community. It's basically a community of creators. Now you're integrating everything in Adobe, and how do you take that creator community, because you're, on your end, you're dealing with the distribution consumption aspects of it. How do you integrate it into the Experience Cloud's kind of the overall ecosystem itself? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of that. One of the things that I think is really exciting and that goes in that direction exactly is, we announced the release of content analytics at Summit. And what content analytics does is it allows you to look at the performance of content. Certainly you can look at the performance of an individual piece of content in all the different places that it showed up. But even kind of more compelling is you can understand what's the performance by the characteristics of content. So you could go look at, I think the example up on stage was something like, I can look at students in the UK, the campaigns that they responded best to, the content that was in there, what was the attributes of the content, so like what colors appealed to them? Did it, were they better off with people in the content, or better off with landscapes in the content? All these kinds of questions. And I think that'll become something that's really powerful for creators going forward. We've moved into a world where, especially, for creatives who are working professionally and working in, producing for marketing context, understanding what performs is really important. And you kind of like, I always think of this as in the single person shop. Like, you think about an influencer, and this probably appeals to you two, like in what you do, you're kind of doing everything, right? You're thinking about like, what do we need to create? You're thinking about how do we distribute it? You're thinking about how to perform, all that stuff. And you can react in real time to that. But if you're in a large organization and there are hundreds of people involved in this process, it's the same end-to-end process. But you've got the folks who, who are thinking about like, well, what should we do, or what do we need, can be really pretty far away from the people who are actually creating it, and then the people who are actually measuring it. And so, starting to have that understanding when you're in the creation phase of what's worked well before and how can I incorporate that, I think that would be really valuable to creators and folks in a community like Behance.
When you think about that community, they're creative incarnate, basically. Yeah. Like, that's what they do, that's what they are, that's how they identify. And some of the stuff that when you think about the agentic stuff, you don't necessarily think about people that are that creative. You think about folks who like maybe a little bit more the developer or the business process kind of aspect. How does agentic cross over and help the pure creatives personally, and how they fit better into the overall? Because I just, that's a rabid community. They love what they do. They love being to create.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily think about the other side having that kind of passion, but how does agentic kind of help everybody get a little bit closer to hitting the target?
Well, so I think there's two aspects to that. One is probably the more straightforward, which is there's a lot that agents can do. Like creatives, if you think about why people went into being creatives, right? It's that like spark of inspiration and creativity that they're really passionate about, right? And then I think a lot of people are sort of focused on the craft as well of really making that come to life. But then there's a lot that they get sucked into that I don't think they really enjoy that much, and so a lot of those pieces, we talked about kind of like creative teams having to be like the brand governance folks, and creative teams having to, like now you created it in this format, but give it to me in that format. So the straightforward thing is like agents can take on a lot of that work for them, which I think is, more the mundane tasks free them up to do the truly creative things. And I will say, my take on where we are with generative AI, right? It's still derivative content that you're creating, right? It's not actually like that true spark of creativity. I think the truly innovative stuff, I don't think generative AI can do that because it's effectively just trained on what's out there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still that opportunity that persists. What I do think is pretty cool, and we're starting to see creatives doing more and more, is that ideation phase where it's like, hey, I just have a concept. I want to throw it out there and just like see what it looks like, really quickly, give me some treatments, like that kind of thing. It's not going to do the work for you, but it's a way to kind of do it really quickly and like see what something might look like before you invest a lot of time and energy and really getting it to that pixel perfect place where a creative wants to be.
So, if I'm looking at Digital Experience Cloud, the core is still, to me, on the product side, is Experience Manager. I still think I still remember when it was called that, but it was actually asset management. But you could do insanely cool things with it anyway. I just got to repeat this just because it was amazing. One of the earlier demos I ever saw of it was a Adobe Summit, actually, early when it was still marketing, summit.
Yeah.
And they changed a giant, video billboard in Times Square, using it from Salt Lake City, right? And basically took something out and put it in, and you literally had a live feed on Times. It was pretty awesome, I have to admit. And it was only an asset management tool then. And then you added all the other tools, which that made it a true, genuine, it's almost, you could literally create experiences. You didn't not just manage them, you could create them.
Yeah.
But that to you, again, a different version of creation than what you were just describing. But at the same time, we're now looking at this thing, and again, as a core piece of the portfolio, it's an astoundingly powerful, really like super powered technology that people have, a tool that people have at their hand. So given all the other things you're doing and given everything you've just described, what do you do with that? Just that again, that to me is core. If it's not anymore, maybe it's not going to be.
No. So this is what's fascinating, and I think we're taking this as some feedback after seeing how Summit has gone. So I'm still in Vegas. This is our third day of Summit, but we had a main stage keynote on Tuesday that it sounds like you all were at or all attended, but there's also a main stage keynote on Wednesday. I don't know if you caught that one, but we didn't do a great job of explaining, like, we're not telling the whole story unless you're in both keynotes. So we kind of had these four big themes that we were hitting. One was the announcement our focus on AI technologies and the announcement of our experience platform Agent Orchestrator. The other big one for the first day was the content supply chain and everything about the Gen Studio solution. But the other two themes that were really important at Summit this year, one is what we call the unified customer experience. And that's really all about the activation of these experiences through journeys and the data, right? Everything we do to sort of personalize that experience to the end consumer. So that whole story is obviously a huge part of what we do and what we've always done, to your point, Paul. And so if you're only there for day one, you kind of missed, like, hey, where was all the conversation about what you're doing with real-time customer data platform? Where's everything with what you're doing with Adobe Experience Manager sites? And that's where we really got into the second day.
I'm gonna literally go and pick it up. I love that product. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last of the four themes was we really declared a big focus on B2B go-to-market orchestration, right? And that was something that we've had plenty of B2B customers for years, but they've also been kind of pushing us on, like, hey, everything you talk about, you kind of lead with the B2C story. Are you really focused on us? And so there have been a lot of announcements in that space as well that are really important. So like the customer journey analytics for B2B was announced at Summit this year. So lots of exciting stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. During the pre-brief that we got, customer experience orchestration. Right. There's a lot of people really happy about using that kind of phraseology as opposed to customer experience management.
Exactly. And then the other thing, which we can talk, maybe we bring you back to talk about it on a different show, but I really want to get some more detail on the journey optimization products.
Yeah.
I'm a Thunderhead. This is my favorite product of all time, right? And you guys have built the closest thing to that I've seen since that. I actually helped advise early on some of your, I was part of advisory help.
Oh, great.
Early on. I love that product. And I think you guys are making some tremendous progress with it. Unfortunately, I didn't see much. I saw it mentioned, but I didn't see much about it. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, maybe set up a time where you and I can just chat offline.
Yeah, I'd love to. Absolutely. And if you check out the day two keynote, you'll see, like, we showed off a journey agent. There's all kinds of cool stuff.
I'm definitely checking it out.
So before we let you go, and I know you got to get out of there because you've been doing this for like 3 straight days. What would you want people that attended? What do you want them to walk away and do once they get back home?
Not eat alone.
Yeah, there you go. Did we get that stat? Sorry, I missed it.
I put it in the private.
He put it in the private, but it's wrong. So you see, if
I had
that's the wrong one.
You said U.S. right?
Yeah, but it was 1 in 4, which is 25%.
That was 27% was the actual number. It's in there. And by the way, the thing I remember about it, which struck me as odd, was that, and this one of the reasons I remembered was, even though this is the 2025 report, all that data was for 2023, right? And I didn't understand that. I remember that's why I remembered that number, and the exact number was 27.
So we're still going with you cheated. So that's too late to make up for it.
I literally downloaded it this morning.
All right. So what do you want them to go?
The one big takeaway, I mean, it's hard because I feel like we just talked about 2 big keynotes. I feel like it was it's like when your favorite artist drops a double album and it takes you a long time to absorb all of it, right? But no, I think the big takeaway and the announcements around Experience Platform Agent Orchestrator, I think what we want people to understand is we've been on this AI journey for a long time, right? The predictive and ML models, we've been in that for years. We done a ton of investment in large language models and in generative AI. You can see that now across the portfolio. We've got customers who are seeing real business value from it across, Creative Cloud, Experience Cloud. And now it's really an evolution of that. Within the Adobe Experience Platform, the Agent Orchestrator lives there. It's built on top of everything we've been doing with Gen AI and traditional ML. And so for us, it's an evolution, and we're really leaning into it in sort of our own way, right? We're focused on how can we help our customers be successful in customer experience orchestration. We're giving them purpose-built agents. We'll continue to deliver more of those, but we're building on top of the understanding that we have because of the work that we've done in this space. We're not asking you to, build your own agents, put together the parts and pieces. We want to help you be successful out of the box. And we want to make sure that this is open and extensible to the ecosystem, because we know that, companies are going to be working with agents from different providers, and they need them to work well together. And that's why we announced partners that we're working with to make sure that this orchestration is going to work across different agentic frameworks, and that we'll continue to do it in a responsible way. We've been really focused on Firefly, and how can we be sure that that we're being IP safe with Firefly, that we're we're doing the content authenticity initiative. We've been really focused on privacy and trust with Adobe Experience Platform, and we'll continue, every investment that we make in this space, we're going to continue to do it in a way that we can be proud of and that our customers can trust. So that's the big takeaway.
That's a good one.
Good way to land. And say hello to Doug Anderson for us.
Yeah,
absolutely, will do.
Love that guy.
And another buddy, I don't know if you come in contact with him a lot, is John Cristofano. I've known him.
Yeah,
I've known him for like 18 years at this point.
So he
to him, it was probably a decade ago. Right?
every word that comes out of Anil's mouth on stage, that started with John's pen. So
he's such a good guy. I both of those guys are. And thanks for you. I know it's probably been a long 3 days, but we definitely appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Excellent.
I don't even think I need to ask you I usually ask about what's your favorite NFL team, but the Patriots suck anyway now, so I don't have any pleasure.
How about you have a favorite? Who do we hate? You have a favorite MLB team.
So I have the misfortune of having grown up on Long Island.
No, that's not a misfortune.
For sports purposes.
Okay.
You grow up rooting for the Jets, the Mets.
Oh, you're the
Knicks.
Newer Long Island.
It's been a rough.
No, see, I grew up in East Meadow, right? So where'd you grow up?
Port Washington.
Okay, so you're up a little bit, but my generation, which is boomers, were Yankees, Giants, Knicks, and Rangers. Period. Now I don't root against the Jets. I like the Jets. I like the Mets. I don't root against. I'm not one of these people who thinks that I'm a New Yorker first, right? So I don't understand. I've never understood, especially Mets fans who hate the Yankees. Right, it was ridiculous there,
especially when they were in different leagues that never used to play each other.
And you know what? When Juan Soto went to the Mets, I didn't sit there and cry. I hate the Mets for that. They paid him more, and he went. Okay, he didn't lose his legacy of the Yankees, which toxic Yankee fans were yelling. So the guy's 26 years old. He doesn't have a legacy yet. And now his brain is, and he was a rental for a year, and his brain is just literally finished fully forming. Right, so be quiet, Yankees fans, on that one. We're fine. Well, without Cole, we're not, but we'll do all right. But it's okay. No, those are definitely not bad answers.
Yeah, doesn't hope spring eternal? It's the beginning of the year. I mean,
the Mets had one of that last year. That run last year was so exciting.
Yeah,
I loved it. I watched it. I watched every minute of the Jets are another story. But I'm a Giants fan, so we have no story either. Let's say this: both of us grew up with the misfortune of Long Island when it comes to NFL football.
Wow.
Yeah, I had no idea that the glory years were going to be the Islanders in the early 80s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Rangers are still hanging in there, but not this year.
Well, at least they had 1994. I mean, at least they made it to the 90s.
And how can you not love the Knicks this year or any year, the last 2 or 3? I mean,
yeah, they're a fun team.
I watch every game. I miss occasional game only.
All right, we better let him go because he's still on the clock here. So, Daniel, thanks again for joining us. And on behalf of Daniel Sheinberg, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM Players, and we can't go away until we say hello to Miss Minnie.
And it's 27%.
Goodbye.